Hello, this is Sarah soiledplant and welcome back to my channel. I kind of want to do a fun video this week, so I thought that we could do a plant superlatives. If you're not familiar with what a superlative is, it's basically hyperbole. It's an exaggeration, and a lot of times in the US, especially in high school, they will use this in yearbooks to kind of give an official title to different classmates that you vote on. You'd have most athletic or funniest or something like that. They'd have these little titles that you would basically vote on who fits that title the best. So I definitely thought I could come up with a few categories for plants and that we could kind of go through them together. All of these superlatives are definitely made up by yours truly, so they don't really mean anything. Basically just an excuse to show you some plants, but don't tell anybody, we're doing this for fun. The first plant that I want to go with is best team player. This is the kind of plant that kind of rounds out a collection really nicely, you know, fits in any sort of collection, fills up space really well, and is a sort of like statement in and of itself, but it doesn't overshadow anything around it really. It's one of those plants that everyone can agree on is just the plant to have, and that plant for me is going to be the Monstera deliciosa. I spun him around for you so you can see his good side. I'm trying to get him to like adjust and grow towards the light, so I'm kind of having him face certain directions so that he'll move some of his leaves around. But this is the good side of the plant, as it were. This is one of those staple plants that just looks good everywhere. It fills up a nice corner. It doesn't need a ton of light, but also like needs some light, of course, in order to grow big and beautiful. I'm finally getting slats on both sides of my leaf again. I have made so many cuttings on this plant because it got so unwieldy, but it is bouncing back. It's finally making some fenestrations for me. Just sort of best all-around plant that you can possibly have. Obviously, this wouldn't work for like someone who wants a small plant or to make like a small space fill up. As far as making a space look great, this is your plant. This will work for any corner you got, basically. The next category I have for you is going to be heaviest drinker. Now, when I show you this plant, I think you'll know why I consider this plant a heavy drinker. This right here is my purple oxalis. This one is very dramatic. It likes to splay out whenever it doesn't get enough water. I have to water this thing so frequently. Granted, it does bounce back when you do water it, but you can see right here, I've got a bunch of leaves that are dead that I'm gonna have to prune off and all of that. Keep in mind we're in the winter, so it's even more dramatic than normal because it's not getting as much light as it would like to have. But I would say this one, definitely I have to water the most often. I do want to give an honorable mention to my Cebu Blue Pothos. That thing I water about as much as this one. The difference is, even when I'm watering that often, this one still does this. I only watered this plant about 4 days ago and it's already doing this. It is just parched and like upset that I'm not watering it. So definitely thirstiest plant is my lovely oxalis. Look at this thing. Like, someone's got a problem. The next category I have is best grower. Now, you could take this a bunch of different ways. I know a lot of people would probably say a pothos, or you'd say some certain philodendrons. Those are kind of the typical ones that do grow very well. Syngoniums, like, of course they grow really, really well, no issues. But I wanted to go outside the box a little bit with this one. And when I thought about this category and which plants will not stop growing and impress me every single day whenever I go look at them, only one plant came to mind, or should I say several plants came to mind. This behemoth right here is my Alocasia dragon scale. And this by far, I don't know what I did in this life or what karmic thing has come for me, but this plant just loves everything I'm doing for it. Just to get a head test in here, like, this is the size of my head, this leaf. This thing will not stop growing. And if you think, oh, that's, you know, a fluke, like how in the world could you have one grow this gigantic? Like, there's no way that this is reproducible. Well, bam! It is absolutely reproducible. I have 2 of these that are massive. Granted, this one has the one head-shaped leaf, but this one right here is not that far behind. It is almost as massive, and it's got another one on this side that is also massive. You know, people always say alocasias, you can only have like 2-3 leaves on it at a time. Look at this. Look at it. This is nuts. I seriously, even if I wanted to, I could not get these to stop growing. I've got roots coming out the bottom, a little bit on this one, but this one is just like aching to get out. It's got roots on the top. And these are the two original plants I bought. They're originally in 4-inch pots, and I got them not too long ago, maybe a year ago or so. And I've already got them in 6-inch pots, and I bet this one, since the roots are coming out the bottom, really want an upsizing a little bit. So I might do that in the beginning of spring for this one. But from these two plants, I will show you what I've gotten. I've gotten this lovely plant, which is about the size of a normal plant that you would see in a store. Little 4-inch pot. I've got a nice root coming out the bottom there, a nice root coming out the bottom. And these leaves are super adorable. You know, compared to the other one, it's not quite as insane. But trust me when I say, this is a lovely plant. This one was actually a pup off of one of the other plants, and this one has just started growing a pup. Look at that. And my male ladies outside. By the way, there's a large winter storm going on right now. So if you hear snow blowers and equipment going on, I have neighbors that are all in their front porch doing all of the snow clearing right now, and I will be joining them as soon as I'm done with this video. If you hear any machinery in the background, that is what's going on. So yeah, the pup of the main plant now has a pup. So this is like my alocasia's grandchildren, and it's only been a year. Not only that, but when I repotted those, I made sure to take out all of the corms and try to get those rooted, and those yielded results as well. Look at these two cute little babies, and I say two, but this one has 2 plants in it, and this one technically has 3 different plants in it. And those are growing really well, and I still have a bunch of corms that just haven't sprouted leaves yet, that are also still kind of brewing and figuring themselves out. But right now, as of today, I have 5 planted, rooted Alocasia dragon scale. I can't get them to stop reproducing, nor would I try. They are amazing. Love it. We haven't had a Maggie interruption for a while. How you doing, babe? Who's out there? What they doing? Now going from something awesome to something not quite so awesome. The next category is biggest brat. And I have a tie for this one, and I almost made it a 3-way tie. I figured I'd limit it to just 2 in this category, and the 2 that give me the most headaches and seem to always be acting out is my Monstera Peru. This plant is not my favorite. I have almost thrown it out probably 4 or 5 times at this point. It is had this one leaf and lone little leaf like this for 6 months. It has not produced a second leaf. It has not produced a runner. This other little stem here technically is kind of growing, but it's taking its time to kind of come out and do its thing. I cut this back over a year ago, probably more like 2 years ago. It was after I moved to Michigan, but not too far after the time I moved to Michigan. So it's been at least a year and a half, and this is all I have to show for cutting it back. And when I cut this plant back, I tried to root all of the little runner nodes. That did not work out. They ended up drying out, even though the moss wasn't that dry, but they were definitely drying out, more so than like other plants, at least that I'm used to. But the 2 top cuttings that were the only other 2 leaves on the gigantic runner on this plant have been like this for that same amount of time. This leaf coming in right here is the only sign of life I have had on this thing in a year. Granted, this one has not been decaying. This one is definitely starting to curl up, so it's probably dead, but I'm just gonna let it run its course. Who knows what'll happen to it. But this side and this are the only things growing on this plant in the last year. So to answer the question of would I ever buy this plant again? No. No, I would not. The other plant that made this list is also a Monstera. Aside from deliciosas, I have the hardest time with my Monsteras. I have no idea why, but that is my Monstera Adansonii. This thing made an appearance on my Funkiest Plants video. If you ever saw that, I will link it in the eye. But this one just shoots off big, huge gaps in between the nodes. No matter where I put it, I've got it in a nice window that gets south and east facing window. No, it's a western window. So it gets south and west light, like all the light it could ever want. And it's still through all of these big, gigantic gaps in the runner. Now, this is what I would call the mother plant. I have taken a cutting of this plant and had it go all the way down to the soil line before, And that is actually in a plant right now that is doing fairly well. I don't want to jinx it. I'll show it to you in a second. But before I do that, I want to show you, I just took a cutting off of the end. You can see I've got a nice little growth point coming in right there. So it does grow. This one is different than the Peru in that this does grow, it just never grows well and it's always funky and I lose leaves a lot on this plant. So this here is the most recent cutting I took. Basically, I just took this one, which look at that bend. That stem bend right there, this little curly Q, I did not make it grow in that shape. It did it all its own. It's basically, it's like a little S for soiled plant. And now that I said that, I'll never be able to get rid of this plant because it's going to represent my channel. This is the other end. I think this is like the very, very tip end of it. And this is kind of like the middle section. I am attempting to plant this again into a separate plant to hopefully grow a little better. I do have this plant, which is from the original cuttings about a year ago. They got spider mites, so I just chopped all of the leaves off, soaked them in alcohol, and then had all of the little nodes in a big thing of moss for a long, long time, finally planted it up. And my other plant, I had enough to make 2 pots about this size. The other one smashed and broke, so I just threw it away in frustration. But this one has survived, and this one actually does look legitimately good. I do lose about a leaf a week on this plant, so there's a couple of little bald patches that I'm not a super fan of, and I'm hoping it doesn't continue. I'm hoping it is a winter problem and not a continual problem, but I love this plant. It's the wide form, if you know the difference between wide and narrow form Adansonii. It just means that the leaves are a little bit wider and the holes are a little bit bigger and deeper. Look at this leaf right here. Ah! That is a beautiful leaf. So when they do this, I love them, and I will probably never get rid of Adansonii because it is so unique and so interesting and does propagate really easily, but that doesn't make it not a brat. It's definitely a brat. The next plant I'm gonna go with is one that is considered the most improved. There are quite a few that could be in this category, my white fusion being one of them, but my white fusion hasn't decayed quite as much as this plant that I will show you next, and that is my Calathea ornata. This plant has been through the ringer. This thing has had spider mites at least 3 times. The first time it got it, I ended up chopping it all the way back. If you've seen either of my Calathea collection videos, you will be familiar with this plant because it at one point was a single lone leaf that looked so sad and so pathetic, and I did end up cutting that leaf off, and it was all the way down to the soil line. This is my little engine that could of a plant. The leaves are huge. It has gotten spider mites once or twice since that initial bout, but I have caught it in time. This leaf right here is a little bit of a remnant of that, you know, but I'm gonna leave the leaves alone because it's not too bad. But once again, you know, I'm getting nice, big, huge leaves. It's definitely bouncing back. I definitely love the look of this plant and it's worth saving, and I'm glad that I saved it, and it continues to kind of be a little rock star and continue to grow, and definitely most improved. The next plant superlative I have is longest plant. I actually walked around and pulled out my long vines, measured them out, and found out which plant had the longest vine. I thought my Syndapsis would take this one, but coming in at 62 inches, just over 5 feet, is this particular string of hearts. To be fair to these plants, these probably would get even longer if I allowed them, but once they get within biting range of the cats, I have to chop them. If I gently pull back this other string of hearts, you can see that I have a little, you know, right there, I have a little container of rooting string of hearts. And from there, hopefully I can plant them into the pots and make these a little bit fuller. That's always been the goal. I keep losing strings here and there, so I'm working on it, but not quite there yet. But this plant, since we're talking about it, has a nice, I'm gonna try not to drop this. This has a nice long, luscious mane here. Let's get to the end. There's the end. And when I measured it, it's not, you know, exact, of course, because I didn't want to hurt the plant, but I measured it to be about 62 inches long. And let me reminisce about this plant for a moment. I remember when I first got this plant, I bought 2 of them from, I think it was like a Lowe's or Home Depot, one of those 2, and it immediately, both of them started dying. I panicked. I tried to save it. I had to depot it and put it into a new pot and do all this other stuff. And I did manage to save them, and now I've got 3 of these suckers that are all kind of doing okay. Like they're all growing and they're all happy, but none of them are full. This is actually the fullest one I have, which is only like 6 strings on it. So I need to get them fuller, but they're all healthy and happy, that's for sure. Now I can't get away with doing the longest plant if I don't do my shortest plant. Now I am not counting any sort of propagations or small cuttings. These have to be actual plants with roots, and the ones that tie for smallest plant is my 2 tiny little succulents. Now I am not a succulent person, and if you've been around for a while, you know that I don't really have a ton of succulents or cacti or anything. I have one euphorbia that's very cactus-like, but no cactus, and these are my only 2 succulents. So the only reason I have these at all is because they were a wedding favor for a wedding I went to in the fall. So I do have these. I have kept them alive, so I'm trying not to overwater them. You know, I'm losing the occasional leaf on it, so I don't know if that means I'm overwatering or underwatering. With plants that are more tropical, it's easier for me to determine whether they need water or not. Like these seem really like nice and plump, but they also feel squishy. Like the soil's dry, but it's supposed to be dry. Like I'm still trying to figure these little guys out, but they do exist. I have them and they are alive and they are the smallest. Now, if you were like, Sarah, come on, succulents don't really count as smallest, like they're everybody's smallest plant. What is the smallest tropical plant you have? Ta-da! This right here is a tiny, adorable little Hoya curtsii. I found this little guy at a local shop for like $8, and I have seen them all over the place, but they always seem a little overpriced. So I thought this little tiny little pot is good enough, you know, and then I can make it grow and propagate it from that. It does have a couple of little vines that are coming out, and this is a little brand new vine. You see that? Like, do you see the little vine coming out? It's alive, it's growing, it does suck up water very, very quickly, and I always feel like I'm underwatering it, but I do feel like it's okay. But I definitely say this is my smallest potted, rooted, full plant right here. To finish this list off, it would be inappropriate if I did not call out the most dramatic plant I have. I already did brattiest, but I feel like that is more, you know, attention grabbing, nothing's good enough. But this plant is just dramatic and sad all the time. Super, super emo, and that is my sad little Calathea rufibarbara. This one got spider mites super bad in the summertime, or at least I caught it in the summertime. I ended up doing my extreme spider mite treatment on this and dunking it upside down into a vat of alcohol and water, and then another dive into Captain Jack's. And I do believe I killed the spider mites, but this poor plant has been struggling ever since. I do feel like it is mostly due to my lack of watering. This poor thing is very root bound, I feel like, so it definitely needs a repot, but I don't have a ton of pots that are bigger. Plus, once it's in a bigger pot, I won't be able to use my self-watering pot anymore. So I've been forcing it to stay in here, and I've been carefully pruning away leaves that are starting to look really, really bad and just kind of chop away any of the riffraff. So it is extra sad at the moment, but it always looks extremely sad and dramatic. I do believe this plant will bounce back. It's not, you know, super stingy most of the time. I definitely think this is 100% my fault. So I will keep watering it, much like the oxalis. I'm going to water it about at that rate, and hopefully it'll start bouncing back, especially in the springtime. Just this winter, in combination with the super, super heavy treatment, just was not good for it. That concludes this planty superlative video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, you can subscribe to my channel. I post videos every Thursday. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye! Now I get to go shovel snow. Yay! The amount of fear in this cat's eyes at all times. I swear he loves me. I promise.